Okay, since I am thankful for having this opportunity, and since I have been given little leeway in time, I will start with an unexpected point, that is the backdrop to the nationalist sentiments, the rebellions in Deccan, and anti-British movement in Hyderabad, and the anti-British movement in Hyderabad. The developments in Deccan in late medieval times and pre-modern times cannot be understood without understanding the nature of the Shia-Sunni conflict. You know, Shias are followers of Ali. Ali was assassinated, and almost all their imams were assassinated, and they were much persecuted by the Sunnis for almost 800 years. And to escape the Shariafication of Islamic society and the imposition of Sunni beliefs, many Shias and other Muslims, devotional Muslims, they escaped to the Deccan, where the Delhi Sultanate could not reach. They migrated through Gujarat, and but they did not declare themselves to be Shia. That was called Taqiya. They used to hide their beliefs because their imams were all killed. Nevertheless, they have three or four distinctions from the Sunnis. First is that their kalima is different from the Sunni kalima. They have a third line in their kalima where they proclaim that Ali is the wali. Wali means guardian, friend, protector. Sunnis have got only two lines in their kalima, which is the confession of faith. Second, in the Friday khutbas, they swear allegiance not to the Sunni caliphs or the Sunni emperors, but to Ali and the imams. So that is why they don't go on Fridays to the Sunni mosque. They used to avoid Sunni mosque because you are swearing in the presence of the divine. The third thing is they also practice tabarra. Tabarra strictly means avoidance of those who don't share your faith, including kafirs. But in Shias, it involves the cursing of all the people who have persecuted Prophet's family and killed their descendants. And they also, therefore, curse the first three Sunni caliphs. This is called Tabara. Now, the point is, in 1500 or so, there was a revolution in Iran, and the Shia Safavids, they captured Iran. Once they captured Iran, shortly after, within a period of few years, Bijapur and Sultans of Bijapur and Qutub Shahis of Golconda, they proclaimed that they were Shias. They openly proclaimed, and the practice of Shia beliefs, which I have described, that started in this region. The Qutub Shahis also had another aspect. They used to patronize Telugu literature because there were a lot of Telugu Samsthans who were supporters of the Golconda kings, sultans. They took care not to attack temples, and they promoted Hindus against the Dakhanis. And to Islamicize the Muslim society, they imported Shias from Persia. These were called Afakis because their roots continued to be in Persia. So, a lot of important positions were given to Afakis, to Afghans, who were also more Islamic. And they used to make huge fortunes in Golconda and go back to their homelands with the wealth. So, this was causing a drain of wealth. Others defected to Mughals. Some of the prime ministers also, former prime ministers of this kingdom and generals, they defected to the Mughals. But the Hindus and Dakhanis of Golconda, because they were born here, their roots were not abroad, they continued to be rooted to the soil. In a sense, we can call them in modern terms, they were Mulkis. There were many Shia Sunni riots reported in the kingdom of Golconda, but no instance of anti-Hindu riots. In 1635, Aurangzeb invaded Golconda. He levied a huge tax to cripple the sultans, banned Tabara, banned the Shia Kalima, and changed the Khutbah to remove the Imams and include the Sunni Caliphs and the Mughal Emperor. As a result, Even 30 years later, Dutch traders found that all the rural mosques in Golconda Kingdom were deserted because the Shias were a dominant this thing. They would not go to Sunni mosques and follow the Sunni procedures. This is the context in which one very strange thing happened. In very strange circumstances, a recluse of Sufi Shah Raju Khanka, Abul Hasan, he was married to Golconda Sultan's third daughter. Very strange circumstances. And when the third Sultan died in 1672, he became the Sultan. He is Tanesha. Because of Ramdas episode, he was actually a recluse who wanted seriously to become a Sufi. Now, within 2 years of his appointment, he removed his Muslim Diwan and replaced him with Madanna, who was the Diwan's revenue secretary. In turn, Madanna raised Akkanna and other relatives to high status. Madanna was a great administrator and he concentrated on raising revenues. But in the efficiency which he showed in tax collection, he alienated many zamindars, and his brother was tactless enough to alienate many rajas. Ultimately, this was one of the reasons for their downfall. Now, a historian called Siddiqui has said that Madanna tried to unite Hindus and Dakkani Muslims against foreigners, and he had ultra-patriotic favor tinged with a regional bias. Actually, his patriotism had a nationalist tinge, because he knew the drain of wealth which was happening because of foreign appointees. And this was actually stated by Akkanna, and it is recorded in Dutch records. Akkanna told a Dutch trader the following: "For you yourself can imagine which government serves the king best, ours or that of the Moors." By Moors he meant those who had foreign roots. I will come to that later. Ours being full-heartedly devoted to the welfare of the country, while we are not people who have or seek other countries. But that of the Moors is only to the end of becoming rich and then to leave for those places which they consider to be either their fatherland or holy. In other words, like Dadabai Naoroji, Akkanna was complaining of the drain of wealth not from India but from Golconda. By Moors, he meant recent immigrants, Pathans, Arabs and Afaki Iranians who were still tied to their land of birth. Unlike long settled Shias and Dakkanis, who had become, like Hindus, sons of the soil. So actually Madanna and Akkanna were advocating rule by mulkis, and this is an idea that resurfaced in Deccan a few hundred years later under the Nizams. We call it the mulki rule, mulki agitation. While these brothers were trying to build a Hindu-Dakkani alliance in Golconda Kingdom, Shivaji Maharaj was trying to mobilize Dakkanis against Afghans and foreign factions in Bijapur. There is a Gorpade letter where he says that we have to get the Dakkanis together, and this may have been a coordinated move between the two brothers and Shivaji, because 3 years after he was appointed, that is on March 14, 1977, Madanna received Shivaji grandly in Hyderabad and arranged a very friendly interview with the Badshah Abul Hasan Tanesha. The Moore, that is to say Afghans, Mughals or Arabs, they were troubled and panic-stricken, but the general populace was very happy, received him jubilantly, and there is a description of what a grand reception it was. Abul Hasan Tanesha financed Shivaji's invasion of the south, but their agreement broke down because the second installment which Tanesha promised he did not pay, and Shivaji refused to hand over certain forts that he had promised. The relationships got spoiled. When Shivaji died in 1680, Aurangzeb's ambitions revived, and he declared both the Shia kingdoms of Deccan to be Darul Harab. He sent his son south with an army. Hyderabad was ransacked, and in his Fatwa-e-Alamgiri, there is a letter by Aurangzeb which says that the two brothers deserve beheading. So in 1686, Akkanna and Madanna were beheaded there by the foreign faction. Their heads were sent to Aurangzeb's son, and Brahmins were robbed and massacred as far as Masulipattnam. And the magnificent Shiva temple complex at Maheshwaram was completely destroyed. This loot and massacre of Brahmins is the first reported instance of Hindu-Muslim riots in Hyderabad, according to a historian. This was Aurangzeb's first gift to Hyderabad. 1 year later, he captured Golconda and Sunnified the Deccan. Now here I want to bring to your notice something that is completely unreported by all written history. For reasons unknown, probably they don't have enough information. But we know about it only from the will of the first Nizam. After Golconda fell, a prolonged but unreported rebellion by Deccan Brahmins against Mughals seems to have been organized by two men, Moru and Ramdas. Overlooked by written history, these two unknown heroes are mentioned only in the first Nizam's will. Nizam's will has only 5 names. One refers to his advisor, the second is that of his wayward son, the third refers to his Diwan Puran Chand. The only other 2 names that he mentions are Moru and Ramdas. It is in the 15th point. There are 2 translations of the will. I will read out the translations of this part. The Taj Ali Shahi translation reads, the Dakkani Brahmins are all fit to be killed and their heads severed. Special mention should be made of 2 leaders of this community. One is Moru and the other is Ramdas. These 2 have been undermining the state for 100 years. I have imprisoned them in Pandit Khanas. They should never be released. It is added, the word Pandit Khana is well known in the world. It means the house of imprisonment of this community. There is a slight variation in the second, significant variation actually in another translation, that is due to one Hussein. This translation reads, the Brahmins of the Deccan, although able, are fit only to be locked up in prison on account of their rebellious attitude. Hazrat Kuld Makan, the Emperor Aurangzeb, had also observed the same. They have 2 ringleaders, Moru and Ramdas, who are the upsetters of this Muslim state. I have confined these 2 in the fort of Ahmednagar. In their continued confinement lies our well-being. Then the translation continues, by Pandit Khana is meant the prison where all these people are kept. Since the time of Hazrat Alamgir Padshah, the standing order has been that wherever a refractory Brahmin is found, he should be taken away forthwith and imprisoned. All these are quotes from documented historians. 4 historical points of interest stand out here. First, Aurangzeb maintained special jail or jails called Pandit Khanas for Brahmins who were rebellious, had a rebellious attitude towards the rule of Islam. This is not observed by most historians. These jails were established either in Deccan or in all his dominions, that we do not know. Second, the Muslim state of Deccan was being upset by Moru and Ramdas, who led a prolonged Brahmin rebellion which was so long that it was described by one translator as 100 years. 3. The Nizam feared the 2 heroes so much that he asked his descendants never to release them. Now such a fear must have had good reasons, because Nizam was a redoubtable warrior. The first Nizam especially was a great warrior. He was not easily scared. 4. Whether the Nizam wanted all Deccani Brahmins beheaded, as Taj Ali says, or only locked up, as Hussein says, his approval of Pandit Khana shows that he shared the anti-Brahmin policy of Aurangzeb. But as Farooqi, another historian, admits, he could not implement any such policy, possibly because he needed qualified administrators, the number of Hindu subjects was large, and he had seen the sorry fate of Aurangzeb's religious policies. Now I will turn to the anti-British conspiracies in Hyderabad and then wind up with the great Sholapur revolt of 1808. After the first Nizam died, two new foreign players entered Deccan politics, the East India Company and the French. While signing treaties with the British, the second Nizam got French-trained troops from Adoni and in 1786 appointed Monsieur Rema as their commanding officer. Hyderabadis have got a very bad tongue. It's half Urdu, half Persian, this and that. It's very difficult for. So they could not pronounce Monsieur Rema, and they called him Musa Ram. The troops of Musa Ram were stationed on a hill in Malakpet, which therefore got the name Musa Ram Bagh. It is now known as TV Tower. From Nizam's side, Raja Mahipat Ram was made liaison officer and Peshkar to Rema. Raymond's troops increased from 300 to 14,000, and Raja Mahipat Ram developed good relations with the soldiers and the French officers. Over time, he became a general in Nizam's army. As the French influence increased, pro-British elements became nervous. After Raymond died in 1798, the pro-British Diwan Arastuja led the Nizam into subsidiary alliance, and Hyderabad became the first company vassal in the whole of India. French-trained regiment was disbanded. Mahipat Ram was transferred to Berar, where he took command of Nizam's Western Army. But here, he re-employed the ex-soldiers of the disbanded French regiment. In 1803, Sikandar Jah became the third Nizam. Even historians of Nizam's time, they have admitted that he was a sullen and reluctant ally of the British. Sikandar Jah, after whom Sikandarabad is named, he held Raja Mahipat Ram in grateful recollection because Mahipat Ram was kind to him and lent him some money before he had become a Nizam in his youth. When Bajirao became an English vassal, Wellesley invaded Maratha lands through Hyderabad. Accompanying him was Nizam's army, which was led by Mahipat Ram. Unknown to the British, Mahipat Ram was secretly in touch with the Marathas and sabotaged the British war effort. How do we know this? Of course, we have heard this in the community tales, but there is also documentary evidence. Company officers complained to the Nizam that local authorities retarded their operations by negligent and in some cases hostile proceedings. That some Kiledars refused asylum to British wounded and in one case even fired on a British detachment. About Mahipat Ram, the complaint was that his troops came only after many vexatious delays, were productive of little or no advantage. The British also suspected that Mahipat Ram's troops were French trained and anti-British. One report even says that instead of assisting the British, Mahipat Ram and his undisciplined troops actually looted the camp of the company army. Mahipat Ram masked his true attitude towards the British in the guise of confusion, hesitation, bad leadership, and even fear. Under great British pressure, he was removed from the army command, but because of his relationships, he was made the governor of Berar and its Jagirdar. When Arastuja, the Diwan, died in 1804, the British resident Sydenham prevented Mahipat Ram's appointment as Diwan, fearing that he would break Nizam's alliance with the company. At that time, Mahipat Ram had come to Hyderabad and with Raja Raghotam Rao was advising the Nizam against the British and Mir Alam. Countering their influence, the British resident warned the Nizam against equivocal behavior, gifted him some Maratha lands and made him appoint Mir Alam as Diwan and Raja Chandulal as Peshkar. These two names everybody should know because of Mir Alam Tank and Chandulal Baradari. Mahipat Ram was forced to return to Berar and Nizam was forbidden by the British to interact with him. The Nizam complied reluctantly, but soon it was found that Mahipat Ram was writing letters from Berar goading him to defy the British, making Mir Alam nervous. Through Ismail Yar Jung, Mahipat Ram kept personal contact with the Nizam and started plotting with Holkar and Scindia to subvert the Nizam's subsidiary alliance with the company. The British suspected tacit connivance, if not avowed consent, of the Nizam in this plot, but they had no direct evidence. Meanwhile, reports reached the residents Sydenham that Raja Rambarao and Nurul Umra were having treasonous talks with British sepoys in the Secunderabad cantonment. Barlow, the Governor General, warned residents Sydenham that this plot would subvert the very foundation of British power in India because, he said, Nizam's power and resources which we now have a right to command for our support and security would be turned against us. Swinging into action, Sydenham brought Mir Alam into British residency at Koti and put him in protective custody. At the same time, the commander of subsidiary forces was alerted for rapid deployment. This news scared the local anti-British faction, and Ismail Yarjang pleaded with Mir Alam for mercy. On November 28, 1806, Sydenham went and met the Nizam and demanded 1. The dismissal of Mahipatram and Ismail Yarjang. 2. Replacement of all followers of Mahipatram in the districts as well as in the army by company loyalists. 3. Channeling of all correspondence of the Nizam only through Mir Alam. 4. Accepting the just demands of the company. And 5. British adjudication on any differences that the Nizam may have with his Diwan Mir Alam. The Nizam surrendered, Rambarao was banished, Nurul Umra and Raja Mahipatram were dismissed. Company began to rule Hyderabad through Mir Alam, who returned to his palace with permanent guard. All offices of the followers of Raja Mahipatram were given to followers of the Diwan. Govind Baksh, the brother of Chandulal, went with British troops as the governor of Berar, and Mahipatram was banished to Sagar in Sholapur. This brings me to the last point of my talk, the 1808 Sholapur Revolt. Although he was banished, Mahipatram remained popular with the soldiers. 2,000 soldiers under Muhammad Riza Khan Sindhi and Nabi Arjang followed Mahipatram to Sagar. They defied all orders from the Diwan to return and they were dismissed. But maintaining so many rebels was a problem. To pay his troops, Mahipatram looked to Sholapur, a tributary of Nizam that was chronically in arrears. Conspiring with a malcontent Inkuppa Nayak, he marched on Sholapur, defeated its army, took its king Pidnayak into custody, installed Inkuppa as the Diwan. In return, Inkuppa paid the rebels, while Mahipatram assured the Nizam of regular tributes from Sholapur and got his approval. British representations against the Sholapur developments were made, but they fell on deaf ears. So, a complaint by Shamsul Umra, who commanded the Paiga troops of the Nizam and was related by blood to Nizam. See, they were brothers or first cousins. So, he would actually be next in line to become Nizam. By a complaint by Shamsul Umra against raids on Paiga lands by Mahipatram's men was added. This forced the Nizam to give his assent to intervention. Then Mir Alam sent his army under Nizamat Jung and Gordon to Sholapur with the following terms. The terms were Mahipatram would be given a monthly allowance of 2,600 plus 4,500 for troops whose number was to be limited to 500 only. In return, all the other soldiers were to be dismissed. Riza Khan, Nabi Arjang, Inkuppa and their followers were to be abandoned, and the ruler of Sholapur was to be released and Sholapur was to be returned to him. When Palmer reached Mahipatram and gave in these terms, Riza Khan and Inkuppa had already gone into Maratha lands to gather Maratha support. Mahipatram engaged the envoy in talks, released the ruler of Sholapur and waited till all his men gathered and these Inkuppa Nayak and Riza Khan returned from Maratha lands with Maratha help. But the Marathas could not help because by that time, because of Bajirao's defection, there was a lot of confusion in the Maratha camp. Because Maratha help was not forthcoming, Inkuppa surrendered to Gordon and was sent to Hyderabad. But the other rebels stayed to fight. On February 10th, 1808, Mahipatram embraced all his principal officers and they collectively swore to defend one another and their lives. Then they moved out to engage Nizam's army, attacking with such fury that the whole of Nizam's cavalry and infantry retreated in confusion, and some European generals were killed or wounded. As his forces evaporated, Commander Gordon approached Mahipatram with a salam, but was met with a sword blow to the neck and killed on the spot. In Hyderabad, the British were very puzzled at the furious attack of Mahipatram, whom they thought did not have either the talent for war or stomach for battle. They thought that his aggression was prompted because he didn't trust Mir Alam. But actually, unknown to them, a letter from Raja's brother Sripatram had reached him, hinting that the Nizam would not be displeased at any measures that Mahipatram might be reduced to adopt for his own security. Mahipatram's hands were thus freed from the bond of salt, and he could strike a blow for liberty or death. After this, the British sent their own subsidiary troops to Sholapur, and Colonel Doughton blockaded the Berar border. Facing better equipped and trained troops, Mahipatram retreated, and as he was chased by the British force, most of his friends and soldiers deserted, leaving him only with Muhammad Riza Khan and his men. Incapable of fighting further, he left Nizam's territory and took shelter with Holkar, who received him and his brother Sripatram and Muhammad Riza Khan Sindhi with great distinction. He is believed to have joined the service of Holkar of Indore thereafter. A year or two after Holkar signed the subsidiary alliance, Raja Mahipatram was killed in Indore in very unclear circumstances. Some say it was a faction fight, others say that it was a mutiny over unpaid arrears that led to his killing, and still others in Hyderabad, they claim that it was the treachery of his employer. We don't know. In 1960s, the Municipal Corporation of Hyderabad, under the mayoralty of Srimati Sarojini Pullareddy, recognized Raja Mahipatram as the first freedom fighter of Hyderabad and named the lane adjacent to Koti Women's College after him. The lane carried a plaque with his name until the Telangana agitation failed. In mid-70s, the plaque disappeared and it has not reappeared since. Raja Mahipatram belonged to the Saigal family and is a Brahmakshatriya. Some of his descendants still live on in Hyderabad. He is still remembered fondly by the Brahmakshatriya community of Hyderabad. Men die, circumstances change, but memories live on. Thank you.